Now, for the next few segments, we're going to focus on the law and major legal stories that are obviously in the news. And let's start by introducing our panel. Jim Kousouros, he's a criminal defense attorney in Manhattan. He sits on the board of directors of the New York City Criminal Bar Association. He also frequently lectures at New York Law School and the bar associations in Queens and New York City. Doug von Oiste, founding partner of Carson von Oiste, focusing on corporate misconduct, also selected by the Legal 500. He's one of the most influential trial lawyers in the country. Mayo Bartlett, attorney at the law offices of Mayo Bartlett PLC and a former chief of the Bias Crimes Unit at the Westchester County DA's office. Now, in a minute, we're going to discuss the legal issues surrounding the coronavirus, but first, an update on how it's spreading. At the White House today, President Trump and Vice President Pence meeting with airline CEOs about new travel guidelines in the wake of the coronavirus.
All passengers on all direct flights from all airports in Italy or South Korea are being screened on multiple times before they board any of these airlines.
The president trying to reassure Americans.
And large portions of the world are very safe to fly.
This comes as Los Angeles County declares a state of emergency with 6 new cases in California's first death.
We need every tool at our disposal to make sure we're ready to support any coronavirus patients who are diagnosed and to prevent any further spread.
9 additional cases of coronavirus are confirmed now in New York as well. The additional New York case is tied to a 50-year-old patient from Westchester County, his wife, 2 of his children, and his neighbor who drove him to the hospital.
It is an imperfect science, especially when you have a situation like this one where you have a person who may have contacted so many people.
There are now more than 150 cases of the virus across the country and at least 15 states affected. The death toll also rising, now reaching 11. Archdioceses across the country are now asking parishioners to suspend physical contact during Lent. The virus impact being felt across the world with more than 93,000 cases. In Italy, all schools and universities will close tomorrow through March 15th. In Paris, the Louvre reopened today. It's been closed since Sunday. And besides the health concerns, we could also see a rash of lawsuits stemming from the virus. And I'm going to quote from a piece in Fortune magazine, the most recent edition. Businesses that have daily contact with the public or who deal with captive populations, they're at risk of getting sued. That's said from Carl Tobias. He's a University of Richmond law professor who teaches mass torts, and he cited nursing homes like the one in Washington state whose residents account for many of the U.S. casualties so far. Quote, the claim could be they didn't move quickly enough to protect residents once it was clear the virus was a danger or that they didn't have proper contingency plans in place. And the piece goes on to say that airlines, venues, other types of businesses could also be at risk of facing litigation. And Doug, I start with you because this is kind of your lane here. I get it from the nursing home. Once it's established, they didn't act quickly enough. But you're already starting to see certain airlines not going to certain markets. You can see cruise lines that aren't going to have, take passengers because they don't believe it's safe given the type of environment with the population encompasses a small area. But it's not universally shared. If a business does something when a competitor is deeming it to be unsafe, are they opening themselves that they are knowingly putting customers at risk and therefore possibly civilly liable?
Well, it goes back to a lot of the tort concepts we talk about, what they knew or should have known. A lot of the case law that they talk about and a lot of the regulations actually comes out of cruise ships. Cruise ships are used to having a captive population. They're used to having like flus go through there, sicknesses. You hear about it all the time. So if a company like a cruise line knows that it's a captive population, knows that if a flu gets on there and people getting sick, they have a different obligation because it's what they know or should know. That would be different than, say, somebody who's in a more public space. So a lot of this is factually driven. Like,
for example, my kids' spring training trips just got canceled. But other schools are going to the same venue. If somebody got sick on one of those trips, could a parent say, wait, that school or those schools clearly viewed this as a potential health threat? You put my kids in that environment, I look at you in local parentis, you know, you made that decision.
So in a case like that, say your school took a New York Times article that said everybody who goes down to this place is going to get sick. They canceled. They did the right thing, canceled. The other schools didn't read that article, but they should have. They didn't know, but they should have known about that information. Then there could be a possible lawsuit.
Yeah, but you also have to look at, there's a concept called assumption of the risk. So if you're aware that these types of outbreaks are happening on ships and you make the decision to go take a cruise anyway, then you bear some responsibility.
But Mayo, I'll give you a sports example. You know, when you go to a baseball game, it used to be if you got hit by a foul ball, that was an assumption of risk. But then certain teams put up netting to prevent foul balls from going into the fans in certain high, where high possible velocity areas where it could be really dangerous. The stadiums that haven't adopted that, they've now assumed a different kind of risk because they knew better. Well, and not everyone was doing the same level of security.
Maybe and maybe not. Because you take additional protective measures doesn't mean that someone who's failed to do so is liable. And the other thing is that each and everything we do every day when you leave your house involves an assumption of the risk. So it involves the understanding that as you walk outside your door, you may get sick. And as someone comes into your home, the same thing may happen.
Now, Jimmy, I want to get one thing, which is I spoke to an economist who said one of the biggest problems is that not every person is equal economically, and these things can be life-altering. Listen, I think 40% of this country has less than $400 in savings. Not everybody has paid leave. So if you get sick and you don't go to work, you're not going to get paid. You don't pay your bills, your lights are off, the tuition for the kids and the rest. What if somebody knowingly is contagious and yet they go to work or they get on public transportation? Forget the reasons why. Do they face civil exposure here because they should have known better?
You know, I don't think so. Look, think about it. People get sick all the time. The flu kills people. People get the flu all the time. They go to work. I mean, I don't know if you know you're contagious with a potentially deadly disease, you may be in a different position, but what you raise is a very difficult question for a tremendous, part of our population.
And I have a feeling, guys, all these questions that have before not gone examined, we're going to have to start dealing with them whether we like them or not sooner or later. All right, when we come back, a 13-year-old boy charged with murder, and he's being treated as an adult, plus allegations of a coerced confession with the police essentially lying to the suspect. Now, those are just some of the aspects in a case involving the killing of a college student in New York City. After the break, the table will discuss.